you mentioned a little bit about it doing commentary, and you kind of just brushed over it a little bit, but really at that point in time, you didn't ever hear women in any, and we, we'll call it sports entertainment, but any situation like that, doing play-by-play and color at ringside. I don't know if you look back now, but that was kind of unheard of. You might see a former athlete on one of the, sports shows for, tennis or something like that. But did you realize it at the time that you were kind of, a woman who was doing something that men did only?
I think it all goes back to the beginning of our conversation. My dad wanted a boy, and I wanted him to be proud of me, and he did. I mean, who ever heard of a blind man doing color commentary? Well, that was my dad. And who ever heard of a woman doing that? But my authenticity came from the fact that I, had picked up on it, obviously. I hope so. I'd watched it all the time, and that it was something that, like, how would she know? What did she know? And that's why the part that when they started throwing it into, you need to be in the kitchen, and what would you know? And I would try to bring the conversation back into what my dad was. Is like, let's talk about his background. What got that wrestler here? And then we'll go in, okay, they're doing a move or whatever, but, to fill in that way of what brought him to this point. Yeah. So that was just a cue that I took off of just what my dad would do, or how to call it, because Bruce would come in, and then those two would say something, and so I would have to jump in and be ready for the slam. Because he'd say, well, what will you know about a hold like that, unless that's something that your old man does to you? And I mean, there were things said that, you couldn't get by with now, but.
Oh, God, no. Are you kidding? Stuff Bobby would say on my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
No way. Yeah. Back then, yeah.
No.
Just comedy.
So that to do that, was really, really fun. I loved that. I think the most nervous that I got was sitting next to Gorilla. I mean, he fed you. God, he
so good.
I loved him. If I ever would have, but I never knew the stuff that Bobby was saying. He was putting me over literally by the things that he would say. Right. And people would come up to me and they said, do you know how bad Bobby Heenan hates you? And I'm like, no. But then again, I didn't know if he really liked me or not. He always was, you know that. He was on top of it. He was constantly Bobby Heenan, and always with the remarks. And so I never knew behind the scenes what he was saying. And people, I forget, like, when he'd flip me with the towel or anything like that, all he was doing was helping me. And I loved it, because he was bringing me into the fold, and so to speak. And that, again, that's acceptance, to where I think one of the other hardest things, too, Sean, was to let them know this isn't, I wasn't there to be the Mike show, and, they didn't know at first, well, what are you trying to do? And there was no beauty contest. I didn't feel that. I wasn't trying to do that by those big, loose men tuxedos, so I, went into it pretty easy, just for the fact of what I had no idea I was getting ready to incur with the remarks. Or and I can almost remember too that when I first was doing it, how the crowd was just like, what? What do you have to say? And then I had this voice, and my dad always said it was loud, so I thought, well, heck, give me a microphone, and somebody wants to listen to me. And again, I used that. What they had told me is, like, if you ever want anybody to listen to you, grab that mic and start talking. And that's what I would do. Or if I'd hear somebody say something like, "Hey, take it off," I would follow that wherever they were, to try to counteract that. But I would let them, without being afraid, I would try to find that voice and nod like, no, you don't want that. So I learned to love that part of it, and I loved the more people that were there, the better it was for me, because if I made a mistake, it was always taken care of in the booth or whatever, but there were so many people that it was like, I don't think any of them's really paying attention to me, but maybe they were, I don't know. Now, when you had a smaller crowd, that's all. Their attention was right there, and if you made a mistake, and I was worried about falling out of the ring. That never happened, thank God. I was worried. That was another thing. We were not allowed to put heel. I know you knew this because Sherry would pop them all the time. The mats that were outside of the ring. We were told don't do that, and so I was always on the ball on my feet when I jump out of that ring. I wasn't having those heels. I wasn't going to. I wasn't going to have. Yeah, just little things like that. You don't think about it, but when they tell you, it's like, and you've got to put a hole in our mats. You think that they don't do stuff now that, Right. So you never wanted to make waves back then. You just wanted to be a part of it and go for it.